Morning, champions. I miss you guys all so much. Boys and girls, this morning I'm going to read The Tale of Peter Rabbit, and then after I finish reading, I'm going to give you guys a writing prompt all you need is a pencil and paper, crayons if you have them, and then as soon as you're finished writing, you can have your big human, your mom, your dad, aunt, uncle, whoever, send me a picture so that I can see your awesome work. So you guys, before I read, I want us to just calm our bodies down, just like we do on the carpet. I don't know if you've been running around, if you've been sitting, watching TV, playing with your siblings, but to listen to a story, we have to calm ourselves all the way down. So I want everyone to touch your snout and take a deep breath in through your nose and touch your chin and let it out through your mouth. We're going to do 2 more. In through your nose, out through your mouth. Last one, in through your nose and out through your mouth. Okay, guys, so the title of this story is The Tale of Peter Rabbit. Some of you guys might have heard Peter Rabbit before. Some might not. The author is Beatrix Potter. Now, the author is the person who writes all the words in the book. That means Beatrix Potter, she thought of this entire book and she wrote it all down. I'm not going to give you guys new vocabulary words for this book because our good reader skill is good readers think about new words that they hear in a story and wonder what they might mean. So as we go through the story, we're going to be listening for words that we've never heard before. And we'll read the page and see, what might it mean? So the Tale of Peter Rabbit. Once upon a time, there were 4 little rabbits. Their names were Flopsy, Mopsy, Cottontail, and Peter. They lived with their mother in a sandbank underneath the root of a big fir tree. "Now, my dears," said old Mrs. Rabbit one morning, "you may go into the fields or down the lane, but do not go into Mr. McGregor's garden. Your father had an accident there. He was put in a pie by Mr. McGregor. Now run along and don't get into mischief. I am going out." Then old Mrs. Rabbit took a basket and her umbrella and went through the woods to the baker's. She bought a loaf of brown bread and 5 currant buns. Okay, so what were Mrs. Rabbit's instructions? Did she have a rule? I'm thinking that she gave instructions that they could play down by the lane or in the fields, but her big rule was do not go to Mr. McGregor's. Do you predict that the bunnies are going to follow this rule? Let's see. Flopsy, Mopsy, and Cottontail, who were good little bunnies, they went down to the lane to gather blackberries. Okay, so we know that 3 of the bunnies are following Mrs. Rabbit's rule, her instruction. But Peter, who was very naughty, ran straight away to Mr. McGregor's garden and squeezed under the gate. First, he ate some lettuce and some French beans, and then he ate some radishes. And then, feeling rather sick, he went to look for some parsley. Okay, so Peter did not follow Mrs. Rabbit's rule. He squeezed under the fence to get into Mr. McGregor's. Now he's eaten up all those vegetables in his garden. But around the end of a cucumber frame, who should he meet but Mr. McGregor? Mr. McGregor was out on his hands and knees planting young cabbages, but he jumped up and ran after Peter, waving a rake and calling out, "Stop, thief!" Peter was dreadfully frightened. Okay, time out. Dreadfully frightened. I don't know if I've ever heard that. I don't know if I've ever heard that word before. But I'm thinking if somebody's running after me with a tool saying, "Stop!" and you're running away, how are you probably feeling? Probably a little bit scared. I think frightened probably means scared. And dreadfully frightened, that probably means you're like at a number 5 on the feelings thermometer. You're really scared. Okay, so Peter was dreadfully frightened. He was really scared. He rushed all over the garden, for he had forgotten the way out of the gate. He lost one of his shoes among the cabbages and the other shoe among the potatoes. After losing them, he ran on 4 legs and went faster so that he might have gotten away if he had not unfortunately ran into a gooseberry net and got caught by the large buttons on his jacket. It was a blue jacket with brass buttons. It was quite new. Peter gave himself up for lost and shed big tears. But his sobs were overheard by some friendly sparrows, who flew to him in great excitement and begged him to try to free himself. They're saying, "Please, please, please, get out of here." Mr. McGregor found a sieve, which he intended to put on top of Peter. So boys and girls, that's a big word, intended. So we see the sieve right here. This is the sieve, and he's trying to put it on top of Peter to catch him with. So intended, I think probably intended means you're trying to do something. You're meaning to do something. Because Mr. McGregor, he has it, and he's trying so hard to put it on. He wants to put it on him. Okay, so he intended to put on top of Peter to catch him. But Peter wiggled out just in time, leaving his jacket behind. He's leaving his clothes all over this garden. My mama would not be happy if I went out and lost all mine. Peter rushed into the tool shed and jumped into a watering can. It would have been a beautiful thing to hide in if it had not been so much water in it. Mr. McGregor was quite sure that Peter was somewhere in the tool shed, perhaps hidden underneath a flower pot. He began to turn them over carefully, looking under each. Suddenly, Peter sneezed. Achoo! Mr. McGregor was after him in no time. He tried to catch Peter, who jumped out a window, upsetting 3 plants. The window was too small for Mr. McGregor, and he was tired of running after Peter. He went back to his work. Peter sat down to rest. He was out of breath and trembling with fright. Frightened, fright. So he's trembling with fright. He's so scared he's shaking. And he had no idea which way to go. Also, he was very damp from sitting in that can. Damp. I'm not sure I've heard that word before. But he's damp because he was sitting in the can, and the can was full of water. So if I was sitting in a pool of water and I got out, I think I would be all wet. I think that damp means wet. So he's all wet. He's all damp from sitting in that can of water. After a time, he began to wander about, going lippity-lippity, not very fast, and just kind of looking all around. He found a door in a wall, but it was locked. And there was no room for a fat little rabbit to squeeze underneath. An old mouse was running in, he's right here, and out over the stone doorsteps, carrying peas and beans to her family in the woods. Peter asked her the way to the gate, but she had such a large pea in her mouth that she could not even answer. She only shook her head at him. Peter began to cry. Then he tried to find his way straight across the garden, but he became more and more puzzled. Presently, he came to a pond. A white cat was staring at the tip of her tail, which twitched as if she was alive. Oh, a white cat was staring at some goldfish. She sat very, very still, but every now and then the tip of her tail twitched as if it was alive. Peter thought it best to just go away without speaking to her. He had heard about cats from his cousin, little Benjamin Bunny. He went back toward the tool shed, but suddenly, quite close to him, he heard the noise of a hoe. Scritch, scratch, scratch, scritch. Peter scuttered underneath the bushes, but soon as nothing happened, he came out and climbed up on a wheelbarrow and peeped over. The first thing he saw was Mr. McGregor hoeing onions. His back was turned toward Peter, and beyond him was the gate. So Peter sees, oh, the end is in sight. I just have to get to the gate. But who's in the middle? Mr. McGregor. Peter got down very quietly off the wheelbarrow and started running as fast as he could go along the straight walk behind some blackberry bushes. Mr. McGregor caught sight of him at the corner, but Peter did not care. He slipped underneath the gate and was safe at last in the woods outside of the garden. Mr. McGregor hung up the little jacket and the shoes as a scarecrow to frighten the blackbirds, all the clothes that he lost while he was in the garden. Peter never stopped running or looking behind him until he got home to the big fir tree. He was so tired that he flopped down upon the nice soft hand on the floor of the rabbit hole and shut his eyes. His mother was busy cooking. She wondered what he had done with his clothes. It was the second little jacket and pair of shoes that Peter had lost in 2 weeks. What is this little bunny doing with all of his clothes? That evening, Peter was not well. Remember, he ate all those vegetables, and he had a tummy ache before Mr. McGregor caught him, and then he was running around with a big tummy ache. No wonder he doesn't feel well. His mother put him into bed and made some chamomile tea. She gave a dose of it to Peter. 1 tablespoon to be taken at bedtime, she said, but Flopsy, Mopsy, and Cottontail had bread and milk and blackberries for supper. The end. So boys and girls, I want you to think about how Mrs. Rabbit gave Flopsy, Mopsy, Cottontail, and Peter a set of instructions. She said you guys can play, you can go down to the lane, you can go to the field, but she had a rule, and her rule was do not go to Mr. McGregor's. Why do you think she had that rule? I think that she probably knew, well, she told them. She knew that what had happened to Mr. Rabbit, right? He got put in a pie. So I want you guys to think about a rule that you have at your house. What's something that your mom, your dad, your aunt, your uncle, your nana, your papa, whoever, what's a rule that they have for you at your house? Why do you think it's important to follow it? So for your writing, I want you to write me a sentence about what is a rule that you have at your house. And if you are an extra smart cookie, write a second sentence talking about why it is so important to follow that rule. Don't forget the big 3. Uppercase letter at the beginning of that sentence, put personal space in between all your words, and a period at the end. If there's no period at the end, put a period before you send it to me, and I want to see everybody's sentences. I miss you guys, and I love you so much. Have a good day.